time to be in the news business. It has, as of today, officially been 50 days of the Biden presidency, which means we are halfway through to that first 100 days benchmark for the presidency of Joe Biden, that first 100 days benchmark that we've used for generations now to mark the initial progress and priorities of a new president. Today, we're halfway there, 50 days in, and what a way to spend that day celebrating the passage of truly landmark legislation that a new Pew survey today says is supported by fully 70% of the American public. Some other new polling actually puts the number even higher than that in terms of the public support for the COVID relief bill. But at minimum, we can say based on the Pew Research Center's polling that this bill has 70% support from the American public, while 0 Republicans voted for it. That is a kind of ratio that usually doesn't end well for elected officials who put themselves in that position. We'll have more on the political aspect of that in a moment and later ahead this hour. But substantively, aside from the politics, this is just a really, really big deal. About 85% of American households are about to get $1,400 stimulus checks to help dig individual American families and the American economy as a whole out of the nuclear-sized crater that COVID put in our economy. Health insurance premiums, one of the biggest monthly expenses for lots and lots of American families. Health insurance premiums are about to go down dramatically for millions of Americans because of this bill. Some people are going to see their health insurance premiums go from considerable amounts, from hundreds of dollars per month, down to 0. Schools, particularly K through 12 schools, are about to get the funding to make the changes they need to make so they can safely reopen. That is finally greenlit at last, alongside the new federal program that aims to have every single teacher, every single school staff worker, every school counselor, every school cafeteria worker, a school bus driver, every school maintenance worker and janitor, every child care worker in America to have at least one vaccine shot by the end of this month. If you work in any of those jobs in schooling or childcare, regardless of your age, regardless of whether you have any comorbidities, you are now eligible to get a vaccine shot no matter what state you live in. And the pharmacies getting federal government support can get you one, and they should get you one by the end of this month, which means within the next 3 weeks. While simultaneously, as of now, the schools are going to get $130 billion to fund the upgrades and adaptations they need to get the school doors open safely. The bill, of course, funds the vaccine rollout. Since we now have one as a country, the largest vaccination effort ever in American history is underway. This is finally the funding for it. And if you need further motivation along those lines, this is an unexpected place to look for motivation given the hell that these facilities have been through over the past year. But look at what is happening now with nursing homes. Nursing homes, of course, were the first entities targeted intensively for vaccines. Nursing homes and other congregate care facilities for the elderly. That has produced such a shockingly dramatic reduction in new cases and in COVID risk overall in those facilities that today the CDC and the part of the federal government that oversees nursing homes, they issued new recommendations today advising nursing homes to start easing their restrictions on visitors for the first time since the pandemic started. And that may not sound like a huge change in American life, but those visitor bans have made nursing home life so scary and so unbearable for our seniors throughout this terrifying last year in those places that finally now easing up is a huge human step forward. And there's a lot of detail to the new guidance. The new guidance isn't directed at members of the public. It's directed at nursing homes in terms of how to shape new policies that can still keep their residents safe, while also taking account of the progress that we've made in making those facilities safe and in the desperate need for people to have human contact with their loved ones. There's a lot of nuance. And again, I'm not going to go into them in detail, but if you are looking for a take-home message as a member of the public based on these new guidelines, if your mom or your grandpop or your great aunt or your elderly friend is in a nursing home, make sure that they have been able to get vaccinated, which means fully vaccinated, which means 1 or 2 doses, depending on which vaccine they can get, and then 2 weeks after the last shot, that's fully vaccinated. Make sure they are fully vaccinated, and then make sure you're fully vaccinated. And then, if nursing homes, in fact, change their rules to account for this new advice from the federal agency that oversees nursing homes. If your family member or loved one is fully vaccinated and you are too, soon you should be able to get in there and go see them. If we can get this together now, you'll be able to go visit, bring presents, be prepared to give hugs. The toll on our American seniors has been so horrific. I mean, we're the worst hit country in the world. We've had more deaths than any other country in the world. We've had the worst epidemic of any country on earth. And the people who have paid the most for it are our seniors. Nearly 1% of all American grandparents have died from COVID in the past year. Almost unimaginable. We talk about there being more than 500,000 deaths in this country. Well, more than a third of our deaths in this country were in congregate care facilities. Just an unimaginable, unceasing tide of death. And then we worked on it and we made that better with vaccines. Because vaccines work. Deaths and new infections have plummeted in nursing homes and skilled nursing facilities and other care facilities like that, so much so that we can start to change the rules. It's working. It's working even in the worst hit parts of our country, the worst hit facilities, the places who have been through the deepest of the bottomlands. It's working. We really can be together again if we finish out strong. On vaccines, today, also on top of everything else, was also the day that President Biden announced that we'll be getting another 100 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And remember, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is one shot and you're done. So the new 100 million doses means enough vaccine for another 100 million people. We're going to be getting that vaccine from Johnson & Johnson this year. That's over and above what we were otherwise planning on buying as a country. And for the first time, if you do that math, this raises the prospect that the United States of America may have a surplus, maybe a considerable surplus of COVID vaccines by this summer. President Biden said today that once Americans are vaccinated first with our supply, if we do then have a surplus, we will share it with the rest of the world, because he says we're not ultimately safe from the virus until the world is safe from the virus. And that is not just hippy-dippy happy talk. That is true. That is math. That is virology. If this thing does run wild in big parts of the world that aren't vaccinated, new variants will develop in those parts of the world that ultimately may defeat our vaccines and our vaccine immunity and will mean that we never get out from under this thing. It really is, just mathematically speaking, in every country's interest that every country around the world gets vaccinated. With a vaccine like this, you cannot have unvaccinated large population pockets around the world. No matter whether we like those countries or don't like those countries or have good relations with them or bad relations with them, for everybody in the world, including us, everybody in the world needs to get vaccinated. And now, for the first time today, it looks like we are going to be in a position to help with that, finally. Here's what President Biden said about it today. He was wrapping up his comments to reporters about this new 100 million doses, about his primetime address to the country tomorrow, and then he took a question about this new idea that we never had before today, the idea of us having a vaccine surplus. Just watch this, and while you watch this, keep in the back of your mind that only 50 days ago, the president was Donald Trump. But boy, what a difference a president makes. Just watch.
Tomorrow night, I'm going to primetime address the American people and talk about what we've been through as a nation this past year. But more importantly, I'm going to talk about what comes next. I'm going to launch the next phase of the COVID response and explain what we will do as a government and what we will ask of the American people. There is light at the end of this dark tunnel of the past year. But we cannot let our guard down now or assume that victory is inevitable. Together, we're going to get through this pandemic and usher in a healthier and more hopeful future. So there's real reason for hope, folks. There's real reason for hope, I promise you. So may God bless you all. May God protect our troops. And may God ease the pain in the heart of so many who've lost so many people in this pandemic. Thank you, and we're going to do this. We're going to get it done. Thank you.
Mr. President, what do you plan to do with the surplus? What will you do with the surplus?
The surplus will, if we have a surplus, we're going to share it with the rest of the world. This is not something that can be stopped by a fence, no matter how high you build a fence or a wall. So we're not going to be ultimately safe until the world is safe. And so we're going to start off making sure Americans are taken care of first, but we're then going to try to help the rest of the world. Thank you.
But we're then going to try to help the rest of the world. Talk about a pivot. From the U.S. having the worst epidemic on Earth, the most deaths on Earth, the most poorly managed response to the crisis of any major nation on Earth, to 50 days later, we've now got a brand new national vaccination program that is vaccinating our people at a rate faster than any other major nation on Earth. We just passed legislation in 50 days from stem to stern that is expected to add 7 million jobs back to the economy, which COVID collapsed, and which is expected to cut poverty in our country by a third. On the strength of all that, soon we are going to be in a position to, like within a few months, we're not only going to be in a position to be able to vaccinate all of our own people, we will then be able to help other countries get to that point too, to help ourselves and the whole world beat it once and for all. From last in the world to world leader, once again. That would be nice.